Today is going to be a pretty simple lecture. I'm simply going to show you how A15 is put together. And I'm going to explain the assignment, and then I'm literally going to go through the process of developing that assignment. The reason for that is because it's a little on the tricky side, but also I would rather you have something to sort of guide your coding. My preference is that you take whatever opportunities you can to do something a little bit different than what I'm doing. I hope you won't turn in an exact copy of what I do, but this should provide you with some pretty good tracks to follow in terms of A15. Okay, so for A15, we are going to be doing an object-oriented version of our ATM. I would highly encourage you to use whatever code you can over again from the first ATM assignment, but you must use both object-oriented programming structures, which means you're going to use classes, and you also must use inheritance. Now, the way that I am going to show you how I use inheritance with this assignment is just one way. You can use inheritance a different way. You can change up the objects. You can, I hope, change how the program interacts, that sort of thing. But really, that's the big thing. And I want you to include error handling in your code. I am not going to include that. That's from a past assignment. So I'm going to stick to the class structure. And as I go through it, I'm going to show you places where I think error handling would be useful to implement. So that said, let's take a look at the structure of these classes as I'm going to write them. So we're in the previous assignment, we weren't using object-oriented code. We were just using a dictionary that has some accounts added to it. And that worked pretty well. But to really have a highly functional ATM where we can have a very consistent implementation of these data objects and their methods and their properties, we're going to use a class structure. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a generic bank account class. And that generic bank account class is going to have sort of the things that are common to all bank accounts, right? So it'll have a name, it'll have a balance, it will have the ability to deposit money, to withdraw money, and it will have some ability to show you how much money is in that account. Those are kind of going to be the methods that we're going to work on. That generic bank account model then will serve as the parent for two child classes, a checking account model and a savings account model. Now, a savings account model is basically just a generic bank account. One thing that a savings account often does is it accrues interest over time. We're not going to do that, but if you want to, that's sort of a good stretch challenge, is how do you implement interest earning in a savings account. The checking account, however, is actually an account where you can write checks. Now, increasingly, I have groups of students who have never ever written a check. I know, crazy. I barely write checks as it is. There was a time when we wrote lots of checks, but now it's not so common. So when you write a check, a couple of things happen. Okay, so you have your checkbook, and the checkbook has your account information on it. You write an amount on that, but each check also has a number associated with it. So, and they're sequential. So check number 1 is in front, check number 2, check number 3, and eventually, if you write enough checks, you'll get into the thousands or whatever. So the check number is a property of that checking account, which check number you're on. And it helps you, those check numbers help you keep track of which checks you wrote for how much money, that sort of thing. So we're going to add to the checking account child class a method called write check. Write check will do a lot of the same things that a withdrawal does, right? Because it takes money out of your account. But it also, each check has a number associated with it. So every time we write a check, the check number is going to increment by 1. And so that is what we're going to be doing. So this is sort of a visual picture of those classes that we're going to create for this bank account. And then we'll implement them. So I'm going to go through that whole project and write it out so you can see how it would look. Now,